Good morning, everybody. Our upcoming session title is, as you see, an imperfect dream come true, coming to terms with the challenges of Aliyah. Will be led by Rabbi. Once you made Aliyah, you'll be turned from a rabbi to Rav. No, you stay a rabbi? No, you never been a rabbi. Take off. I'm sorry, I have to stick with the text. Rabbi Heshie and Rabbanit rookie Billet. Rabbi Heshie is former rabbi of Young Israel of Woodmere and past president of the RCA, Rabbinical Council of America. He's been a prominent voice in American modern Orthodoxy, speaking on issues of Jewish identity, Zionism and Israel advocacy. And Rabbanit rookie is Yoetzet Halacha, like my wife, and a former principal of leading high schools in America. The Billets made Aliyah and now divide their time between communal leadership and Torah education in Israel. We are very pleased to have you over and looking forward. B'atzlacha. That's all.
Okay, so I'm actually not going to speak first. Rookie is going to speak first, but I'm just going to say a sentence or two or three of introduction. So I read a book about Yoni Netanyahu, right? The brother of the current prime minister, who was, I guess one might say, the hero or the martyr of the events in Entebbe. And Yoni Netanyahu said that when he first went into the army and he had to begin hiking, it was his first opportunity, lahargish et haaretz, to feel the land. I just love the phrase. When you make Aliyah, you have to be able to feel the land. And feeling the land means a lot of different things. We're going to try to touch on a lot of the different details about feeling the land. I just want to say that there are a lot of great Olim to this land. Among them are David Ben-Gurion. Jabotinsky tried, but he never made it here. Ben-Gurion and Jabotinsky were ideological rivals who became good friends. And Begin and Ben-Gurion were certainly ideological rivals. When Begin first came to the Knesset in the beginning of Medinat Yisrael, Ben-Gurion used to walk out every time Begin got up to speak. And then one day Begin stayed in the room, and Ben-Gurion stayed in the room when Begin got up to speak. And Begin said, "I have to make Birchat Shechayanu B'Shem U'Malchut," that Ben-Gurion stayed in the room. In the end, Begin was Maspid Ben-Gurion. He called him Lochem Gadol Sheshmo Charut La'ad B'Toldot Amenu, right? He said he was a great fighter whose name is etched forever in the history of our people. Yariv Shali V'Yadid Shali. He was my adversary and he was my friend. And making Aliyah, in a certain sense, also, we have to become yedidim with the land. There are a lot of things that sometimes might make you feel like a yariv, an adversary with the land, because it's sometimes not easy. There are lots of different issues that come up when you make Aliyah, and we're going to try to discuss the experience of Aliyah, the challenges of Aliyah, and my wife, Rookie, will speak first.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. And I just wanted to say that when I was a school principal, I would always say the people in the last 3 rows come to sit in the first 3 rows, but I'm not going to say it today. Okay. I'm just going to open with a little personal history about how we actually got here. So, we both had a Zionist upbringing, both at home and at school. I give a lot of credit to my 4th grade Hebrew teacher in the Shulamith School for Girls. She opened every shiur right after Tefillah with a map of Israel. And she would have each girl go up to the map, and you'd have to point out the city that she mentioned. So the map of Israel from the time I was 9 years old was part of my toda'ah, part of my zeitgeist, etc. I also love to tell the story that my mother's high school yearbook from an American high school in New York in 1941, under her picture and her blurb, it said, "Future Hebrew teacher in Palestine." And I asked my mom, in a public school in 1941, there wasn't even in Israel. And, you know, she told me it was like a yeshiva, and that there was a Hebrew club, and Dr. Hurwitz, who wrote the book, How the Hebrew Language Grew, was her teacher, and his son was my son's teachers in Chorev and my grandson's teacher also in Chorev, which is like, just remarkable. Our parents, both of us, were active in the Zionist organizations. And I'd just like to fast forward very quickly to, I was in Machon Gold in 1970. I was privileged to be there. And at the closing ceremony for the end of the year, we were on the beach in Caesarea. And I remember our madrich at the time, he was a famous madrich by the name of Dov Bigun. He asked the crowd, we were about 30 girls, and he said, how many of you think you will be here on Aliyah within the next 5 years? Every hand shot up. But of course, life happens, and it didn't happen quite that way, although 2 of our friends did make Aliyah pretty much right away. I came back from Israel then, and I threw over a young man that I had been dating before because he wasn't enough of a Zionist. We got married in 1972, and we spent our first year of marriage here in Israel, which was also a very wonderful introduction to Israel. And it was, we were very grateful because we grew up on the Hebrew language. We both knew Hebrew, and as an educator in America, it was something I emphasized so much because Hebrew has enriched, our lives. Certainly during the war, it has enriched our lives. And it is a challenge, and I would just like to say that even with our knowledge of Hebrew, filling out all these online forms is a real drag. We often need assistance, etc. But okay, life happened. There were career concerns. My husband was an only child. He had, parents that were, needed some attention. Financial concerns. We missed every opportunity to buy an apartment. When it was $40,000 in 1973, it was way too high. And then, of course, when it was $100,000, it was out of reach and so on. But we were here in 1991, 92, when we were married for 19 years with our 6 children. And that also made a tremendous impression. I also gave advice to people, if you want to make Aliyah with your kids, tell them you're coming for a year. Then at the the middle of the year, they say, we got to stay, we got to stay, we got to stay. When you tell them they're coming on a Aliyah and they're leaving their lives behind, oh, we don't want to go. We have our friends here and so on. So it was a wonderful introduction, and not all of our kids are here on Aliyah, but at least 2 are, and we're very grateful, and they're all raising, Zionist families, albeit at the moment in the U.S., but 2 have excuses that we had, which was being in the Rabbanit. Okay, there are many challenges of Aliyah at different stages. We have our grandson-in-law from London came right after high school, as did both of his siblings. And maybe in a certain time, that's an uncomplicated time to come. But of course, you have no parents, you're a lone soldier, you had an adopted family, and we had a wonderful story that my daughter's lone soldier brought that lone soldier to her house for Shabbat, and he married my granddaughter. So chesed gorer chesed. When you come before marriage, there's no extended family. Sometimes you need to complete your education, and those are challenges that one faces before marriage and before having completed your education. When you come with young children, many say at a certain age, up to a certain age, it's okay. I know our daughter had told us that if they couldn't find a job by the time their oldest was 9, they weren't sure that they were going to come. So that year, they had said by March 1st, they didn't find a job by March 1st, and by May 1st, they said, we're going anyway. And of course, once they got here, they did find jobs, although the first job was a take-home pay of $7 an hour after you paid the babysitter. But all good anyway. They're here 20 years, thank God. They have a son-in-law and 3 sons in the army, and a Miluim wife as a daughter, and so on. sometimes when you move, and after your kids have reached that age where they've aged out of an easy move, there's resistance, and that can sometimes be overcome. When you're deep into your career, there's a fear of failure, and there's a fear of not making a living the way you become accustomed to. There's a fear of not rising to the top of your profession because you're a foreigner, and or you're not going to have a security clearance, or whatever it is. When you're a little older and you have aging or ailing parents, you have guilt. There's love. There's concern. You know, how do you leave? And we know many friends who go back to the U.S. every couple of weeks in order to visit their aging parents, but they have made the decision to live here nonetheless. When you have grown children, and not all of them are living here, they sometimes feel abandoned, you know. I know my youngest daughter says, even though my older sister made Aliyah 20 years ago, I feel you know her kids better than you know my little kids, and it's likely true at the moment anyway. When you come after you retire, as we did, it's a kind of now or never feeling. You do feel you're fulfilling the dream finally, but it depends on whether you have family. We have friends who have no children here and no grandchildren here, and they came anyway. And we have friends who were lucky enough to have all their American kids make Aliyah, maybe not all at once, but in staggered stages, and they're, you know, obviously very, very grateful. I also wanted to just say, a friend of mine said, when she saw the title, she said, "The Imperfect Dream." I said, we didn't choose the title. The title was given to us, and maybe the title should have been "The Improbable Dream," because you know, when you grow up, especially in a place like America, which up until recently seemed to be a very good galut. It was a beautiful galut. We had 40 kosher restaurants in our neighborhood. We had this choice of yeshivot. We had a million shtools and shtibels and mikvaot and everything. And it was, but thank God, it was a dream that has, in fact, come true. So once you're here, there are also challenges. You need to figure out where to live. I know people of our age and stage choose to live near the kids, which makes sense. We have one child in Gush Etzion and one child in Yerushalayim, and we bought the apartment in 2005, so we knew where we were going anyway. I mentioned the language insufficiencies as a challenge, and how richer life is in Israel when Hebrew is part of your language. Cutting your ties. I know I love to forget, and I have succeeded in forgetting a great deal of the trauma of emptying our house and giving away things and choosing what to take, and feeling like, I mean, I had filing cabinets from all my years of teaching and education. I grew up in the non-digital age with papers and Xeroxes and, you know, and mimeographs and etc. And it was very hard to leave behind that. My father was in the furniture business. I left behind my bedroom set, you know, that my daddy had provided. You know, there are emotional aspects, there are choice aspects. It's very hard. I have to tell you that I even find keeping in touch with my American relatives not so easy, because they're, you know, I can start calling them at my 4 p.m. and my 4 p.m. is already a very busy time. You know, I do in a certain sense cherish my mornings here, because they're my own, you know, in the sense that the Americans are still asleep. But then I think about my grandmother, who came to America and left her mother in Europe in 1913, and she was 15 years old, and no phones, no WhatsApp, no video chats, no nothing, you know. And I guess there were letters and so on. And it was, and she made it. She made it. I think having family on both sides of the ocean is also challenging. We feel very grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we still have the energy and the wherewithal to be able to travel and go visit our kids. And our kids are not clustered. They're Florida, Philadelphia, New Jersey, and New York. You know, the last three are somewhat clustered, but nonetheless, it's a trip. You know, when we go visit it, we try to combine other things. I know people have said to me they find, you know, that having Sunday being Monday is a challenge also. And when you're used to having that day after the weekend, it's but we've adjusted. Look, I think kids in the Army and grandchildren in the Army is probably the biggest thing. People ask us, how do you sleep at night? And I asked my daughter that because, you know, she's here, and she said, Ima, when you raise your kids here, that's what you expect. Your expectations are that they're going to go to the Army. So it's not a shock. And therefore, obviously, you wake up in the middle and worry, and if you hear a siren or you wake up in the morning to, you know, Hutar Lefirsum, God forbid, you know, that we have permission to announce the falling of this. It's, you know, it's terrible, and people talk to us about the knock at the door and so on, but we live here, and we are charged to defend our land and to be a part of Am Yisrael and Tzva Haganah Yisrael and Tzivot Hashem and so on. I know that there are security concerns that also, you know, worry us. When we were here in 1991, it was before the Gush Road. We always went out to the Gush anyway, passing Heshie and Bethlehem and so on, Yericho. We drove through all those years, etc. And they were not easy, but one of our friends who lives in Shiloh, he said to us, if I can't sit in my living room, it's not worth owning my house. And you know, the analogy being that you have to be able to go where you need to go in Israel, and you have to be able to feel like this is my home, this is my living room, and we're all in God's hands wherever we are. I know that one of the challenges is so many losses. One of the things that I do a lot of tefillah, especially since the war started, a lot of Tehillim, and I mentioned a lot of names, and I mentioned the names of about 30 soldiers that we actually knew, either them or their families, that have fallen. I say their names, Le'ilu Nishmatam, every day after my Tehillim. So many losses, so many. I sometimes think about how the stereotypes in the Nazi era of the ugly Jew, and you see the faces of these young men, and every single one of them is more gorgeous and more smiley and more attractive than the next, and their lives were cut by our wars, unfortunately, in the way we have to live in this difficult neighborhood. On the lighter side, some of the challenges of Aliyah for us, and as I emphasize, the lighter side have been, as I mentioned, the bureaucracy, the online forms. It was wonderful walking into the Misrad HaRishoy to renew our license the other day, and when they asked us how old we were, they said, you can come in without waiting online. And, you know, I guess we're starting to look our age. You know, we've been plagued by driving tickets. You know, they gave us our licenses just based on an American license, but they never told us that yellow diamond meant a transportation lane and you weren't allowed to go in it. But you know what? Nonetheless, we're working on it. For us, the medical system has been good in the sense that we feel well taken care of, but we definitely miss the personal touch of the doctors that we had. And having been, you know, my husband was the rabbi of a big shul, most of our doctors were our congregants, and we had their cell phone numbers, and, you know, we waited in the office when you know, for the appointment time, but we just felt like VIPs, and here we're mamash nobodies, which is okay, but it's still a little bit of a challenge. I just like to say that in addition to the challenges, there are tremendous joys and gratifications of living here. The cultural opportunities are incredible. We live a 9-minute walk from the Jerusalem Theater, and we feel also like we certainly were never living near Lincoln Center or anything like that in the United States. The chesed opportunities that we have here, you name it, there is a support agency for everything. You know, we've involved ourselves a little bit with the Opanat Ofra, which caters to students with disabilities, and we love it. Our granddaughter ran the marathon, Jerusalem Marathon for Shalva. The founder of Yachad is our neighbor. We have followed Shai Grauker a bit in terms of helping all the families of widows and orphans and the bereavement stuff. And because we are experienced bereavement people, we sometimes speak with some of the people who've been bereaved. The infertility agencies are incredible, the Eden Center and the Geffen. For those who are seeking a little bit more spirituality and connection, we've followed Shlomo Ra'anan from Atziel HaShachar, and we've just found, and that's not to mention all the food for soldiers, all the packing for the poor, all the leket, all the harvesting, there's just so much to do here, which is just so wonderful. And of course, there are learning opportunities that are unbelievable. The shiurim that are available are fantastic, and we are again very grateful that we can listen to shiurim both in Hebrew and in English, and get the flavor of Tarat Eretz Yisrael in whatever language it is given. We've had also wonderful experiences meeting other Olim. And other people from other walks of life. We have some friends who are Haredim. We have a very, very sweet cousin in Kiryat Matasdorf who's been here for about 55 years, who is, and he has a son in the IDF, a grandson in the IDF, and he was proud of him. It was so nice. We've had opportunities to meet with secular kibbutznikim and to also see that we're all part of Am Echad, Billet Echad. We got a connection with a group called HaKipot HaShkufot, the transparent kippot, which I thought was such an interesting. It wasn't a sruga, knitted. It wasn't a velvet. It wasn't a shtreimel. It wasn't any. But they don't wear any kippot. But they consider themselves connected with the religious fabric of Israel, in the sense that they wear, so to speak, kippot that are transparent. We're absolutely grateful for our American friends and for the other Anglos we meet and we know, and we've met Brits, we've met Australians, we've met South Africans, and we've enjoyed them. I also like to just comment one more thing. When our kids were young, we had a neighbor who was a very interestingly cultured man, and he gave them a book called The Tongue of the Prophets, and it's a biography of Eliezer ben Yehuda. I'm sure it's out of print. Yeah, Robert St. John was the author. And we read it, and the kids read it, and it was just the dream of hearing Hebrew in the street and using Ivrit as the language of everyday life and the language of the gas repairman and the barbecue assembly guy, which was us, or the language, whatever language it was, I'm saying whatever topic it was, the Hebrew worked for it. It's just so wonderful. And we do feel here a tremendous idealism, patriotism, sacrifice, and optimism, even though sometimes, when we listen to the news, it does not always give us cause for optimism because of the insanity of what we see as the outside world and the way they swallow all the lies and all the falsehoods and all the accusations, and then they make an apology on the New York Times on page 32 for the, picture that was this big that was erroneous. But we are here to stay, and we are grateful. And I'm just going to close with, if there's time at the end, we'll answer questions. That despite the challenges, I am truly a believer that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us wherever we are. And if my number is up, my number is up. And if I'm going to be blessed with longevity, well, I hope it has quality. And life isn't perfect wherever we find ourselves. So the perfections or imperfections of living in Israel are something that I am prepared to accept, embrace, and go with and fly with and love. I definitely feel like we are where we are meant to be, that we're part of what I used to call the unfolding of Jewish history and the creation of Jewish destiny. This is where it's happening. This is the Merkaz. This is the center, and it's a center of Am Yisrael, Be'eretz Yisrael, and on a daily basis, I say, I write. I guess I should also just say, keeping oneself busy might also be a challenge. And thank God we love to hike, we love to walk, we love to exercise. We daven, we learn, we write, we what? We fight, yes. My husband could tell you about all the fighting. Okay, and I just like to say that every day I say, Mi ka'amcha Yisrael. We are a unique and special people, and we have to embrace all of us, even those with whom we disagree and with whom we consider a little bit adversarial, as we say. But we are all part of one great corpus of Am Yisrael, and especially Be'eretz Yisrael. So thank you so much for listening.
So in addition to the fact that we fight, Rookie is always right. That's what she told me. When I was at YU, I was in the shir of Rabbi Lichtenstein. So I remember the first year that I got there. I'm a graduate of Beta Tau Alpha, BTA, Yeshiva University High School for boys for bad boys in Brooklyn, very bad boys in Brooklyn, and I was a decent student in my class, and then I came to YU, and I had to fight to get into Rav Lichtenstein's class because the senior Rebbe in BTA, Rabbi Yogel Zichrono Livracha, said that my shir is considered to be a sophomore shir at YU, and everyone from my shir, when you go from BTA, which doesn't exist anymore, but when you go from TA in Brooklyn, you have to go to a junior shir. So I said to Rabbi Yogel, but I want to go to Rabbi Aaron Lichtenstein. He said, you can't, he's a freshman shir. So I went to the registrar of REITs, and I said, I would like to go to Rav Lichtenstein's class. I said, I'm sorry, I promised Rabbi Yogel that everyone from his shir goes to a junior shir. So in any event, I was a BTA boy, though, and to give you an idea what a BTA boy is, so I came to YU, and I did not go to the shir I was placed in. I used to go to Rav Lichtenstein's shir, and 3 weeks later I got called into the office. I don't think Mr. Abrams, Zichrono Livracha, remembered exactly where I wanted to go, but he said, you have not been in shir for 3 weeks. I said, that's correct, and I do not intend to be there. All this time I was auditing Rav Lichtenstein's class. And he said, well, then I'm going to have to punish you. And he demoted me to a freshman shir, and he placed me in Rav Lichtenstein's class. So anyway, Rav Lichtenstein taught me a certain concept. So my first year in YU, I went to his shir, and we were learning Psachim, the third Perek in Psachim. I was lost for 4 weeks because we had never learned the idea that you have to think when you learn. It's very easy to read Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos and translate it. But to think about why the different commentaries disagree with each other is because they had different principles that they understood out of the Talmud. He taught us how to think. So we learned, at that time, the third Perek in Psachim, and then for the second semester, we were doing Arvei Psachim, and he said to us then a word which I didn't know what he was talking about. He said, Arvei Psachim is kind of snippets. I said, what? Snippets. Anyway, what I'm going to do today with this group is give you a bunch of snippets, and you'll understand what I mean as I go forward. So I have a whole bunch of different strategies and thoughts, similar to what Rookie did, and some points of view on certain things. One of the things that we found most useful is keeping a diary. And ever since the war began, we have published, we just published to ourselves, send it to a few of our friends, and I finally found a use for Facebook. I'm on Facebook for about 15 seconds a week, when I copy our update and I paste it. And that's the end of my use of Facebook. But we have published 70 updates of our experiences during the war. And our friends who read them, and some people who we don't know, but are acquaintances of our friends, find them very interesting and enlightening, and it's been very good for us because we review our week, and it also, I think, gives a little bit more meaning to our life and to how we use our life. So I would like to suggest that when you make Aliyah, keeping some sort of diary, you don't have to write Dear Diary every time you write something, but is something that's useful. I think that another thing that's very important is Ladat et haaretz, not only lahargish et haaretz, not only to feel the land, but to know the land. And the way you know the land is by going on tiyulim, walking the land. Kum hit halech ba'aretz is what Avram Avinu was told. He was told to walk the land, visiting museums, visiting places where you can get culture and you could learn more about the land. If you get to learn, just as similar in marriage, as we get married when we don't know each other that well. Maybe we went out for however long we went out, but you don't get to know somebody until you spend more and more time with them, you live with them. I think the same thing here. The more you do to get to know the land, it enables you to appreciate the land more and more and to make the Aliyah experience more significant and more meaningful personally. And one of the challenges in this country is shopping for food. Shopping for food, of course, on a certain level, I don't know to what degree it affects Olim, it depends on your budget. We know Rami Levy and Osherad and Sharei Revacha very well. We also know some of the, and Sharei Revacha is a Haredi market. I learned something very interesting about a Haredi market once. I walked into Sharei Revacha, and there was a big thing of toilet paper, in the front. Toilet paper was on sale, and they had a sign, Lelo Chash Shemot. No, you don't have to worry that this toilet paper may be Shemot. So I said, what are you talking about? Well, what's happened that Shemot, from Sfarim, Sidurim was discarded, and a paper manufacturer took it and manufactured toilet paper with it. So we have toilet paper with hashgacha here. Only in Israel can you find such toilet paper. And Sharei Revacha, Lelo Chash Shemot. So the Shuk is a popular place. I want to tell you, not that I don't notice these things, but Rookie tells me the Shuk is more expensive than a lot of other places. But the Shuk is an experience. The din of the Shuk, especially late in the week, is really, it's very moving, and I find it very inspiring to seeing all these Jewish people coming to all these Jewish duchanim, and and people, they're advertising, and everything is eser, the big number. It's all perfect, zahav, gold, everything is great and fantastic. Volunteering in this country is a wonderful thing. People are always willing to accept volunteers. Volunteers are very inexpensive. But it's also very important. During the wartime, of course, volunteering, I know we, with a lot of group of people, we used to go harvesting because the people who used to do the harvesting were in the army. We went to a place called Brothers in Arms, where you see these people who've been seriously wounded taking care of each other, and you learn to appreciate the courage and heroism of people. They had really serious injuries. Some of them are amputees, but they're working and trying to make their life better by themselves. It's an incredible, it's so inspiring. Making sandwiches and food for the troops, going to Sderot. I remember we helped with a group of people. They asked us to help the people in Sderot. We bought thousands of dollars worth of meat, which was frozen. I picked it up one day more than once, actually. The truck brought it, and then we drove to Sderot to deliver it to the Merkaz HaChesed in Sderot. And the people there, they needed that kind of stuff. There are so many wonderful opportunities to do things. Becoming familiar with services, Rookie mentioned, is very also important. There are a lot of important services. She mentioned the Ulpanan Ofra, which has for children who have special needs. And what's great about the Ulpanan Ofra, I would say, is also that the children with special needs are totally integrated in the regular girls' school with the other children. There's no distinction made between them, but they have services for them within the context of the school. It's a wonderful thing. There's a place called Lotem, which is run by JNF USA, which is somewhere up north. It's a park for people with special needs. There are so many opportunities in this country to volunteer and also to appreciate the tremendous Ahavat Yisrael that you find in this country. I think as a student of history, which was my major in YU after Rav Lichtenstein talked me out of going to medical school, so I had to give up all my pre-med courses, and I became a history major. The history of this country also, the Torah tells us, I say history is a mitzvah, because what does it say in the Torah? Zechor yemot olam, binu shnot dor v'dor. You have to remember these things. You have to understand. If you don't understand history, you can't appreciate your presence in the land. So to know about Theodor Herzl, and by the way, to know that Theodor Herzl was a yeshiva bacher through 4th grade, and to know about Jabotinsky, to know about Ben Gurion. And Ben Gurion, a lot of people see him as a leftist. Ben Gurion today would be well into the Likud. He was so conservative about certain things. There's no prime minister in Israel expelled more Arabs from this country than David Ben Gurion, and no prime minister gave away more land than Menachem Begin. And the Gemara says, the Gemara asks, what's the name of Mashiach? So the Gemara says the name of Mashiach is David. There's a Medrash that says the name of Mashiach is Menachem. Both Ben Gurion and Begin, who I mentioned earlier, were rivals and then actually respected each other. Everything that they did, whether it was giving away land or expelling the Arabs, was all for the sake of creating a Jewish state where Jewish people could feel safe and secure. To know who Avram Stern was, I knew Avram Stern, who was the head of the Lehi. I met his son, his only son, who he was in utero when Avram Stern was murdered by Inspector Morton of the British police. He became the head of the Jerusalem Symphony Orchestra. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. His name is Yair, because Avram Stern's nom de guerre was Yair. Yisrael Eldad was one of the founders of also of the Lehi. There was a split when the World War II went on. So you had the Irgun, the Eitzel Irgun Tzvai Lomi, and you had the Haganah, and the Haganah laid down its arms to join with the British to fight the Nazis, as did the Irgun. But Avram Stern said, no. The British are still our enemies. We have to fight them. So 2 of the people who joined him 3 of the people. After Avram Stern was murdered, he was succeeded by a guy named Yellen Moore, Yisrael Eldad, and Shamir. Ben Gurion, who was their rival, Ben Gurion had a dog. And what do you think Ben Gurion named the dog? Eldad. It's just part of the colorful history. The Haganah, the Irgun, and the Lehi were 3 very important, heroic organizations in Israel. But when you live here, and you make Aliyah, if you know the history and you know the personalities, you feel so much better about where you are and so much more comfortable. You're at home. Yesterday we have a grandson who's here with us. We took him to the military cemetery we took him to 2 places. My grandfather was a Belz Chassid, so we took him to Belz. That was in the afternoon to see the Beis HaMikdash that they built in Jerusalem. But we took him to the cemetery, and we saw the memorial, the military cemetery, Har Herzl. We went to the museum, the Herzl Museum. If you haven't been there, it's worth going to the Herzl Museum and Har Herzl. A lot of museums are worth it. In Givat HaTachmoshet, the museum is worth it. In Gush Etzion and Kfar Etzion, the museum is worth it. A lot of good museums here. So at the Dakar Museum, I saw a guy, in Har Herzl, at the Dakar Memorial, I saw a guy, 24 years old, who was on the Dakar. It was the Israeli submarine that disappeared. His name was Pinchas Kuflik. My father's father, my grandfather's sister, married a man by the name of Kuflik. And I have a second cousin named Paul Kuflik who lives in the 5 towns, and his name is Pinchas. And I saw one of the people on the Dakar, 24 years old, was called Pinchas Kuflik. I sent it to Paul. And this morning he said, that's really, I have to work on this because it has to be a relative of mine. The Palmach Museum is just the Palmach Cemetery. We went the other day to the Palmach Cemetery. You go to the Palmach Cemetery, these are people got off the boat, came to fight, and were killed in the battle for Latrun. They're buried there by themselves. Made Aliyah on such and such date in 1946, fell 3 months later in 1946. That's what you see, the tremendous sacrifice that people made, that soldiers made. And of course, we know all about the IDF today. Ricky spoke about Hebrew. I just want to say a little bit more. Hebrew is something that if you don't know the language well, you can get to know the language better, but you have to invest time in it. I think you have to spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes every day reading something in Hebrew and getting a good dictionary. We read in our home the Jerusalem Post, we read Makor Rishon, and we read Yediot Achronot all the time. We read books in Hebrew. And the advantage of a dictionary, right, is that a dictionary teaches you the meaning of words, but you have to be patient. You have to be willing to spend the time to look up the words, and you'll be surprised how quickly your vocabulary will improve. And if you try to speak Hebrew, how much better your Hebrew will get. Rav Lichtenstein's father, Dr. Yechiel Lichtenstein, who was an Ivrit teacher in BTA, he was a short little man, Dr. Lichtenstein. So, you know, it's very hard for sweet people like Dr. Lichtenstein to be a teacher in BTA. But I remember one of the things he told us, I didn't know what he was talking about then. He said, boys, for your Jewish future, get a concordancia. So, you know, BTA, how the boys would speak it. Hey, Doc, what's a concordancia? You hear what he said? We should get a concordancia. Well, you should get a concordancia. Concordancia it tells you every pasuk in the Tanakh, right? Every pasuk in the Tanakh, and it cross-references it all over. It's a fantastic, important tool in terms of your Hebrew reading and your learning. You have to get comfortable with public transportation here. The public transportation is quite good. The buses and the trains and the whatever kind of rails they have over here, you have to get comfortable with it and have to learn to use it. If you're going to Ben Gurion Airport, there's nothing better than taking the train from Yitzchak Navon Station to Ben Gurion Airport. Of course, to get to Yitzchak Navon Station, it might take you longer than it takes to get to Ben Gurion Airport, because first you have to get to Yitzchak Navon Station. Then you have to go down 3 miles into the bowels of the earth, come out in China, and then you take the train for 20 minutes to...
If your son drives you, he gets a 500 shekel ticket for driving in the wrong lane.
No, that was me. There are so many wonderful causes. Rookie mentioned Shai Graucher. Shai Graucher has B'yachad L'Natzeach. Shai Graucher was a businessman. He was the son of the late singer Dedi Graucher. Shai Graucher, since the war began, has dropped his business plan, and all he has done is chesed. He goes all over the country, bringing things for the orphans, the almanot, the yatomim. He is unbelievable. We spent the day with Shai Graucher. It's worth it to call him or to get a group together, get a bus, and go with Shai Graucher and just see what he's doing. There's another Mishugana who's a friend of ours. His name is Shlomo Ra'anan. He has an organization called Ayelet HaShachar. He builds synagogues in kibbutzim who are Shomer Hasir, or in communities that have no synagogue. I was once with Shlomo Ra'anan. He's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guy. So we come to a community, there's nothing there. Guy says to me, Ani lo ma'amin be'Elohim, Ani lo ma'amin b'Torah, Avol ani ma'amin b'Shlomo Ra'anan, v'im Shlomo Ra'anan rotzeh Beit Knesset, yeh po Beit Knesset. Soft kiruv. Know how to speak to people. Don't talk down to them. Speak to them straight in the eye and do things with humility, and it's amazing what you could accomplish. I'm telling you, we've been at a lot of places with Shlomo. We go all over the country with him, and every time we're amazed and moved. Charedim. Charedim are a big topic in this country. And in our crowd, there are people who look down on Charedim. They don't serve in the army, they're fanatics. But you also have to know that nothing is just simple, right? It's I'm just trying to think of the word that Rav Lichtenstein used for multicolored. What was the word? Okay, I can't think of the word. You have a guy like Menachem Bambach. Who's Menachem Bambach? He's a guy from Beitar Elite. He wears a shtreimel. Till age 22, Menachem Bambach did not speak a word of Hebrew, only Yiddish. Then he woke up one day, And he went to the Hebrew University. He got a master's degree. And he opened up a school called a school system called Netzach. Netzach gives a full Bagrut education to Haredi boys and girls. When he opened Netzach, they wanted to kill him in Beitar Illit. You know, really, he by the way, he served in the army, Menachem Bambach. They wanted to kill him. Today, there are lines around the corner to get into his school because the kids are getting an education there. They get an education. It means that they don't become schnorrers and go collecting on Sundays in America, but rather they're going to do something and they're going to be gainfully employed. There is a Haredi unit in the army called Chashmonaim. There is the Nachal Haredi in the Givati Brigade. When Ofer Winter was the commander of the Givati Brigade, Ofer Winter instituted a Haredi unit in the Givati Brigade. And there are many Haredim in the Navy and the Air Force sitting in front of computers and doing the technological work for the Army. So there's nothing, there's nothing monolithic in here. It's polychromatic is the word Rav Lichtenstein used to use. I can't always remember Rav Lichtenstein's words. I don't even know that I still understand them. But you have to understand the Haredi society is also polychromatic. More of them should be serving the army, you know, in my opinion, no question. But there are a lot of good things that they're doing for the state of Israel. Tanakh. Tanakh is such an important part of our right to this land. You know, Ben Gurion said, they once asked him, what is your kushan? What is your document that gives you a right to the land? And Ben Gurion took out the Tanakh. You know, Ben Gurion, by the way, came from an observant home. He absolutely came from an observant home. He stopped putting on tefillin at the age of 14. But no, I don't say that to ridicule him. I'm just saying he understood. He understood our kushan was the Tanakh. And, you know, and I studied privately with Nechama Leibowitz for a year. I called her up. You know, when my friend said, you know, you have to learn from Nechama Leibowitz, I said, what do you mean? I sat in the Rav Shia for 6 years. I'm going to learn something from a woman? And yet that was the arrogance that you sometimes develop as a yeshiva bacher. Anyway, I called up Nechama Leibowitz and I said, you know, I would like to learn with you. She, well, what, I have a shiur here, a shiur there. I said, no, I have yeshiva or whatever. Or I was at the Hebrew U all those times. She said, well, I'll tell you, what do you want? I said, an hour. She said, an hour in a week I always have. Come to my house Friday. She used to live behind the Tachana Merkazit. She always has an hour, but you didn't understand. When you went to study with Nechama Leibowitz, you had to have 3 hours because she learned with you for an hour and that she loved to schmooze. She was a big schmoozer. And for 2 hours you listened to her stories. And I know that she told me once about a commentary on the Ibn Ezra called the Mechokekei Yehuda. Right? It's a 5-volume Chumash, Mechokekei Yehuda. And I actually bought it. And then she said to me, come to my, now when next time you come with this volume of Mechokekei Yehuda, Sefer Shemot. And then I come there and she says, turn to page so-and-so. Turn to page so-and-so, it's blank. It's just look, that your Mechokekei Yehuda was printed in Israel in 1970, whatever. Look at mine, printed in Odessa, 1898. And the page was full because they took out, whoever it was, because it was a maskil, a more enlightened person who was quoted by the Mechokekei Yehuda, they took out the entire page. But Tanakh is so important. The Yemei Iyun and Gush, which were taking place this week, phenomenal. You have 4 days of the learning of Tanakh. It's been happening for 30 years now. 4 days of learning Tanakh. And tomorrow, Thursday, is a Tiyul Tanakh, which we are going on. The city of David. I actually entered the city of David in 1992 with David Be'eri and the group of Jews who went into the city of David. Everyone was against everyone going into the city of David. Now, the Israeli government takes all the dignitaries who come to the city of David because the city of David is where it all began, really. Ir David is fantastic, and there are beautiful things. The Tanakh comes alive there. Tzipori, not the Tanakh, it's the Talmud that comes alive in Tzipori. As I said before, mentioned something about the museum, so I just want to quickly mention my list here. Ammunition Hill, Kfar Etzion, the Anu Museum in Tel Aviv, the Palmach Museum. There is a new museum. You know, we sat with a friend, a classmate of rookies in Florida. And she was showing me a picture, and she showed me a picture of a uniform, a U.S. Army uniform. It was her father's uniform in the U.S. Army. Her father was a refugee from Europe. He came to America, and he fought in the U.S. Army in World War II. and she had his uniform with certain, award decorations on the uniform. And someone offered her $50,000, right? She said, no. She donated the museum, the uniform, to a new museum here in Israel called the Museum of the Jewish Soldier. Now, you might be familiar with the Tank Museum in Latrun, but near the Tank Museum in Latrun is this fabulous museum of the Jewish soldier, Jewish soldiers who fought in the armies of the nations of the world, and you have to make an appointment there. You have to pay for an hour-and-a-half tour. My rookie's father was wounded in the Battle of the Bulge in France in 1944. It was very meaningful to us. It's a fabulous museum. The only thing is they don't give you time to browse, but it's still worth going to the Museum of the Jewish Soldier. In Jerusalem, there's the Chal HaGvura. It's where many people from the Lehi and the Irgun were hanged by the British. The Chal HaGvura. It's a famous story of Rabbi Levine. Rabbi Levine used to visit the soldiers. The famous, the tzaddik in Yerushalayim. Once he was not allowed into the prison to visit the soldiers. And he used to wear a long black coat, Rabbi Levine. He's Benji Levine's grandfather, if you know Benji. So Rabbi Levine, what does he do? He walks around the back of the prison there, and there's barbed wire. And, the prison, the officer in charge of the prison had turned him away. So he sort of, if you're a little bit athletic and you watch the Olympics, whether he measures his steps back a certain amount, he's going to jump over the barbed wire. He jumps, and his coat gets caught in the barbed wire, and he's stuck. The British find him. They take him to the commander of the prison, and they say, "Oh, you again? Now you can go visit the soldiers." He said, "I thought you were you came in here, you wanted to walk around, but now I see how committed you are. I'm going to let you in because anyway, the Chal HaGvura in this right off Rehov Yafo in Jerusalem is a worthwhile place to go. It's important to find good guides and good programs. It's important to be responsible on trips. If you take a hike or you go somewhere, someone else in your family or your friends should know where you are. Never go without telling someone where you are. Unfortunately, I know too many stories of people who went hiking in the desert, never told anyone where they were, got lost, and some lost their lives, some almost lost their lives. People have to know where you are. And today, with the kind of communication we have, it's very easy to do that. Finding the right medical services in this country is another challenge of Aliyah. There are organizations that will help you. Magen L'Choleh, Rabbi Fisher, Ezra L'Marpeh, of Rav Führer. There is on WhatsApp. For those people who belong to Maccabi, I don't know anything about Muchedet, but those people who belong to Maccabi, there's a website, and people are constantly giving each other advice what they did in this situation. A chat. That's our relationship. I'm always wrong, and she's always right. It's a chat. I'm sorry, I used the wrong word. You have to try to find the good medical services here. Driving in Israel, you have to know the roads. Don't go on roads, even if Waze takes you there. Don't go if you're suspicious and you're being brought to a place where maybe this is the wrong road. Don't go there, right? There are forbidden places. Do not go to unfamiliar areas in Judea and Samaria, or for that matter, in the northern part of the country where you have a lot of Arab villages. If you travel on the Kvish HaBikah, you have to know what you're doing. Kvish HaBikah goes through certain places which are not so safe, and so you have to know the road signs. I have a pet peeve, but this has nothing to do with Aliyah, and I'm not going to say it. My wife won't let me say it, so I won't tell you my peeve about the organizations that post pictures of rabbis on each roadside and say, wait for the coming of Mashiach on public signs. Okay, but I won't say who that is. There are opportunities in Israel that you have that you can't get anywhere else. I mean, today you can't do it, but I've done it 3 times. And my friend Marty, who's here, did it, I think, once with us when we went to Jordan. And we went to Petra, not because we wanted to see Petra, but because we wanted to climb Har HaHar. And I have a whole long parish on why Har HaHar in Jordan is the right place. Har HaHar is not only in Jordan, Har HaHar is also in the northeastern part of Israel, right? It was in the boundaries at the end of Matos Maseh, but Har Har means a mountain on top of a mountain, as Rashi says, Tapuach Katan al Tapuach Gadol. And since my father-in-law was a Kohen, but you had my grandfather was also, thank you, I'm corrected again. My grandfather was also Kohen, but going to a place like Jordan, we've been there 3 times to see Tiulei Tanakh up north in Jordan and in the south, are great opportunities, not today. There are a lot of senior citizen benefits here. You should take advantage of them, including what Rookie said, not having to wait online and all sorts of other benefits for Alta Yidden like me. Wine. It says, it says in the Navi that one of the things you should do in the land of Israel, you should drink the wine. Yeah, I remember there was a time in Israel 50 years ago when the only wine you can get was sweet wine. Today you can get the most fantastic wine from numerous wineries, boutique wineries, fantastic wine. If you learn that you don't have to only drink sweet wine. If you don't need only Concord and Malaga, is that 5? Is 5 Chamesh? Okay, but I'm going to be finished on time. Helping out the soldiers, supplying the IDF. So there's an organization called FIDF. You have to be careful. FIDF is going through some difficult times. But there are other ways that you can supply soldiers. We had a grandson in Yeshivat Har Etzion who was at a unit of 60 boys. And unfortunately, they were not being given good equipment at the beginning of the war. So, if the IDF isn't doing it, and if the FIDF isn't doing it, we acquired 60 tactical shirts, 60 tactical pants, 60 tactical helmets of the best quality, 60 tactical gloves, and 60 tactical schnitzel sandwiches from the Schnitzeleria in Beersheba, and we brought it to Sdei Teiman, we brought it to Bach Givati, and we gave everyone the exact same thing. But the important thing is that the soldiers are the most important people in this country. They're the young boys that Rookie described. We have to take care of them, and we can do it. We need Jewish unity. That's and Jewish unity is very hard. If you've ever been a rabbi of a shul, you know that Jewish unity is really hard. But the fact of the matter is that Ben Gurion and Begin reconciled, and they spoke with admiration of each other. That's, if you read Hebrew, you can read the book by Segel, what's his name? What? Chagai Segel, Mashiach B'Sdei Boker. And you'll see the story. It's very interesting how, for the sake of the Jewish people, they unified. Jabotinsky and Ben Gurion became friends. Yoshua Kohen, who was, Ben Gurion used to call him HaChaver Shali HaTerrorist. Yoshua Kohen was in the Lehi. Yoshua Kohen was the guy who, 2 blocks from my house, assassinated Count Bernadotte when he wanted to give Jerusalem and the Negev to the Arabs. Yoshua Kohen assassinated him. Ben Gurion didn't know him then, but Ben Gurion was the prime minister. And Ben Gurion denounced what a terrible thing. Secretly, he was happy. Yoshua Kohen then moved to Sdei Boker. In 1953, Ben Gurion moved to Sdei Boker. Ben Gurion's bodyguard, what do you mean, they're terrorists? And Yoshua Kohen and Ben Gurion became best friends for life. When Ben Gurion died, his family wanted Yehoshua Kohen to say a hesped for him. They used to walk every day. He became Ben Gurion's bodyguard. They wanted him to say a hesped for him in the Knesset. But the labor Knesset would not allow Yehoshua Kohen to say a hesped for Ben Gurion because Yehoshua Kohen was in the Lehi. And Ben Gurion used to call him HaChaver Shali HaTerrorist Hachi Tov. HaTerrorist HaChaver Shali Hachi Tov. So there are a lot of interesting things in this country. If you make Aliyah, you could learn more and more about them, and you could really enjoy living in this land. I know we enjoy living in this land. We are so happy that we made Aliyah, and we wish everyone success and happiness in everything you do. And also, it's very important to appreciate the work of the Rabbanit Zohar, because they are the rabbis who are really doing the job that's important for all of us. And it's nice that everyone came to the conference, and you should continue to follow Zohar and to assist them in all the wonderful things that they do. Okay, it's a good thing that Rav Stav came into the room. I wouldn't have said that otherwise.